I'm here.
Stop to think how unique we really are. In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle. Mr. President, I want our fellow citizens to know how much you did to carry on this tradition. By your gracious cooperation in the transition process, you have shown a watching world that we are a united people, pledged to maintaining a political system which guarantees individual liberty to a greater degree than any other. And I thank you and your people for all your help in maintaining the continuity which is the bulwark of our republic. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else?
All right, everybody. It is the disclaimers by Ed. Had to put in a filler because somebody was busy and forgot to watch the time. So now, Ed, will you grace us with your knowledge, please?
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. And it is about sharing knowledge from one to another, and others involved, and that is the most important thing, that is proper education. And that's the one thing that, it is getting over the hurdles and the confusions that we are led to believe. And that's the one thing that we get frustrated with, because we always get these things that we're led to believe, but what is the truth? It's like I've been dealing with a lot with the 14th Amendment, dealing with a capital C citizen and a lower C citizen. It is like people think that, that doesn't matter. But actually, it really does matter, because when the 14th Amendment came through, and they kept the blacks enslaved by the low C citizen. And it does make a difference, because court cases have proven that. I posted up a lot of information. I posted a lot of that stuff dealing with the military, and I've had positive response from the military here recently, stating that they never even thought of that, and they never saw that, they didn't comprehend it, basically some of the emails or messages I got back. And people are starting to catch on the truth of the circumstances that we are living. And this is the one thing you have to realize, and we have to realize, that we are living in a mass confusion of wrong education. Because if our school systems really educated the kids today, they wouldn't be getting what they call traffic tickets and all these businesses I put up to deal with federal laws, where the thing with federal laws is it's very simple, that you don't have to get into their system. It says that the city and county cannot own states, the city, county, and states cannot own property. I've even got the federal laws that says banks cannot even own property. And this is the one thing, is the reason why they get away with this is because the people don't stand up. And once the people start standing up to this stuff and start separating themselves, and I'm going to read a part here that was sent to me, because I'm going to get into the other point too, as part of it getting back into the court systems, Article 1 and Article 3. So that way people can comprehend the circumstances of the courts and knowing how to file. That's why when everybody talks about, we're bankrupt. Well, wait a minute. Who's bankrupt? The bankrupt did not bankrupt we the people. The bankrupt happened to the banks. The banks went bankrupt to we the people. And if you actually read the laws, what was filed under March 9th, 1933, you'll see how this thing comes out and proves these things, because these are the points that without the factual evidence, and that's the one point you want to make sure I like to quote what they wrote. They wrote it, I quote it. So I like to bring these points of view in, so that way we're not going by hearsay evidence, and it's comprehending how these court systems truly work compared to what we're led to believe. It's like when they put the capital small c in place with the, I believe that was called the 14th Amendment, and I'm going to get into that one here on, I got to pull this up. I want to read some stuff to you on this so you could get the comprehension how they did this to sneak this through. And when you read this stuff, and like I said, I spent literally years at the Oregon State House and Senate, and I read these things, literally. I read the Senate and House bill. I read they have a deal where, what is the effect, financial devastation it'll cause, the way I look at it, but they call it what the financial assessment is. And I don't look at it as a financial assessment, because that was the one point that people don't get this point when they're talking this. Remember, the House and Senate rules are copyrighted. They are corporation copyrights. So once you comprehend what a copyright is, they're claiming and owning it. So that's technically not for us to use. But we can use it as their evidence against them. And that's what I do suggest to people, is use their evidence against them. Because they wrote it, quote it. Because it comes out so simple on these things that when they write the stuff that they're supposed to be protecting we the people. And that's the one thing that people have got to comprehend, that is we the people. And there really is a structure of lawful and legal in the country. I know. Me and Dave wrote it up for the Supreme Court, Judge Scalia, before he was murdered. We wrote it up and brought it to his attention. We were asked to bring it into Judge Scalia by Judge Roberts. So, I mean, I'm not making up this stuff. I'm bringing this stuff to your attention of how these things work compared to what we think they work by. And once you start standing up and you realize that these things are written against you primarily because they want your money. And when you pay a debt, or you pay anything with a Federal Reserve note, that's where the debt goes up and up and up. Because when you see the federal debt goes up, because the banks and the British government went bankrupt to we the people. And I have proven that all the way through Congress. There's been no arguments through them. It's been preserved through them. That's why I do have House Resolution 192 that was certified by Congress in Congressional Library. When you start putting these things together and reading this stuff and not interpreting it, see, when you start asking people to interpret these words and interpret this stuff, this is where you lose out on these things. Because you're not a lawyer, you're not an attorney, you're not part of the fictitious corporation structure. Because your Article I courts are fictitious. Those are military tribunal courts. And once you comprehend that these are tribunal courts, and when you go in, you mandatorily always challenge jurisdictions, but I always suggest before you even go into their territory, into their ship, always make sure you put a letter in asking and for them to justify and certify their jurisdiction. So you challenge the jurisdiction when you go in, because there are two courts in the country. One's in Article I, that is the legislative British Administrative Court of 1871. That's when the American Bar Association was formed August 21, 1871. And so when that was formed for the people to control you, that's how they did that. Now, the Article III court is Constitution. But you have to, when you do your instruments, you have to know how to put your instruments together and claim that either you're Article 1 citizen or an Article 3 capital citizen. Because when you read the 14th Amendment, they did change the 14th Amendment. They changed it from a capital C to a lower C. So that's how they're getting away with it. And it's like the slaves. Everybody thought, oh, well, they freed the slaves. No, they didn't. They ensured the slaves were more slaves by putting the lower C in it, or nationals. And I always love these groups out here going, I'm a national and I have these rights. Well, it says right in the law, and I'm going to read this part of the law, seeing I brought the nationals in, 5 U.S.C. Code 552A. Clearly states that all lower C citizens and nationals and individuals are owned by the corporation of the United States. And that's the one thing when you do put your ends together, when you put United States, you have to know how to put it together. Either it's for the United States for America, United States of America. The United States for America was original, then they changed that from for to of. And this is the one thing in Act 301, nationals and citizens of the United States at birth. See, and this goes to 8 U.S.C. 1401. So, that's the one thing is that when it comes to the birth structures, we get to know how these things work. And that's where you need to know how these things work. Because if you don't know how they work, how do you know what jurisdiction you're in? Because you have to know the jurisdiction you are personally in. And if you don't know that jurisdiction, how are you supposed to survive? How are you supposed to educate your children to have your children know the truth of what's going on in your communities, in your states? Because, see, in California, I was in the last year, in 1980, where they taught the separation, technically. They taught the separation of church and state. If you wanted to be a Democrat, this is what you had to live by. If you didn't want to be a Democrat, this is what you do. So these are things that you have to be able to comprehend, these things of what's going on around you. And if you don't get the stuff that is going on around you, this is what gets us confused. This is what gets us in trouble. Because right now, I did send out to the entire House and Senate, finally got all that finished, and I put it out, and they'll be on the Facebook, the new.org and trackers in a day or two. But I just want to let you know, I served them to ask them who owns the children. Which branch of government owns the children? Legislative branch? Executive branch? See, these are the things that you comprehend, that when people say, well, we only have 3 branches of government, we have 3 branches of government that is very simple. Very simple. Let me get this to you. You have the judicial. You have legislative, executive. Those are the corporation. And then the original, the first one is we the people. So knowing what we the people stand for and knowing what your standing is as we the people and claiming it. So you have to file your rights and claim your rights. If you don't file and claim your rights, who has the authority to have the rights if you don't do it? And the one thing is I did put up in this letter too, with another letter I did on a capital C and a large C, or capital C and lower C, where the president, and I'll get that to you, the president has authority to say who comes in this country and who don't. Everybody wants to argue, we have this right, we have that right. Well, okay, great. That's fine. But you have to know what a right is compared to a privilege. So in executive order, this is the one thing that people do not comprehend. Apparently I didn't fully do it in that one. Let me get over here so I can sit there and read this law to you so you comprehend the actual statement that the president has rights. Now, I've emailed this to judges around the country when they said that, Obama don't have rights. U.S. Code. The president has statutory authority to keep anyone out of the country for any reason he thinks best. That is 8 U.S.C. 1182. So, and this is what Trump is doing, and everybody's going against him, and all these Democrats. Well, the only reason why the Democrats are going against him is because they want the damn money coming in off a birth certificate bond, because so if they can register people to a birth certificate bond, now they have ownership under and over the 14th Amendment. And that is to clarify what lawful and legal is. So you have to comprehend what lawful and legal is. This is your responsibility to know the separation. And until you start putting these pieces together, because I know it takes a while to put some of these pieces together. Everybody takes a little time to put these pieces together. But once you start putting these pieces together and it comes to light, all of a sudden things start coming really to light where it really starts making a lot of sense. And that is the point that people need to realize, that this makes sense once you start stepping out of the movie, watch the production. That's why I always recommend a movie called Interstate 60, because it really does truly explain your court system. And once you sit there and comprehend that your court systems are explained, then you get this whole thing that changes everything in your surroundings. Everything gets changed. And so that's the point, is educating yourself. That's like when I sat there and I sent this email out to every senator and House member of Oregon. I put this on Facebook. I sent it to people. We'll see if they have the courage to do that or not. And that's just where people are, because some people don't have the courage to stand up. Because most people want to be scared little children, and, you know, it's easier to go pay a couple $100 than taking time off work fighting them. And when you fight them and you start fighting them enough, then they stop messing with you. But that is up to you to make sure that happens. If you don't make sure those things happen, how do you expect your children to have the comprehension to protect their livelihood, to stand up for their circumstances of the country, or stand on their ground? It's that simple. How are they supposed to stand on the ground of the soil unless you tell them or educate them what is really going on around them? Once you educate them about what's going on around them, and you educate them on the court systems, taxes, because I remember growing up where everybody says, oh, it's mandatory, you have to pay taxes. There is no way out of getting out of taxes. And I never paid. I got out of tax system. I wasn't going to play their game. And everybody says, well, you can't do that. You'll go to jail. Well, I've been there where the IRS came after me, state and federal. And I'm, proving the point that, it's very simple, that they haven't been able to prove their point. And I proved my point. Where's the law? Prove the law to me. And they couldn't prove the law. That was the interesting point. They couldn't do it, prove the law to me. And then when I did that, like I said before, I got a letter from them saying, we apologize and you'll never hear from us again. And so I appreciate that letters when I got them. But I had to stand up for my rights to put that in. If I didn't stand up for my rights, they would have taxed me. Everybody's getting panicking because the Democrats put in a new tax bill, apparently, to raise everybody's taxes. And Trump is fighting against it. And people got to realize Donald Trump sat there with his offshore accounts and paid down the national debt. But would the mainstream media write the truth on that? Oh, no, they won't do that. Because they do that, that proves that some of the stuff Donald Trump is doing is correct. Now, there are things I totally disagree with Donald Trump when he's opened up public land, for that, and also too going after taking away native rights. He can't do that because of the treaty. He can only do that if you're a 14th Amendment lower C citizen or national. But if you file for your rights, and I've been trying to get comprehension through some of the Indian tribes, here's what, why, and how. And it's like people don't want to get that point. That's what gets to me. People don't want to comprehend the real truth of what's going on. That's the saddest part of all the circumstances we live today. Because when we think about it, we have 14th Amendment rights or privileges. It depends on where you're classifying yourself at. And that's where you have to determine how to file your paperwork. I mean, I filed my paperwork throughout the House and Senate, and it's been filed in the House and Senate. It's been publicized in the newspaper for 3 weeks straight, so that way it cannot be alleged I missed something. It was even publicized, which I have the videos that where the former District Attorney Robert Vett and the former sheriff tried to kill me in jail. Those are up because I went and spoke at the House and Senate hearing in 2015, and nobody disagreed with me. They wanted to end the hearing meetings immediately. They tried to gavel me out, and that didn't work. So it's being not afraid of what's going on. That is the point, is not to be afraid of the circumstances of what we're living. And so that was the one point that you have to comprehend when you're filing these paperwork and you're making these changes, to make sure that you know what you're filing on the paperwork. You have to make sure that you comprehend what you are filing. So if you are brought into a foreign agent court, Article 1 court, because that's legislative courts, military tribunal courts, you know how to make your stance. You know how to speak what you know. And you always say when you go to these courts, you're here as special appearance, the threat of your life and personal harm. Because that's what they do. Is when they pull you over and issue you what they call a citation, they're threatening your life with a gun. Because they have guns, and that's what it is. It's disgusting when you see all these people being shot in the street for traveling or even jaywalking. But people don't comprehend it. Oh, I have rights, but they don't speak the rights. They don't talk to the cops in their language. And that is the one thing to point to make sure that you comprehend their language. Because once you comprehend their language and you speak their language, they leave you alone most of the time. I mean, until I really got politically and started speaking out, that's when I started being attacked. And until that, I never had issues. But I decided I'm not going to sit there and be a slave to these men and women. And like I said, when I just put out the letter I just put out asking them the corporation structure, who owns the children? What authority? What branch of government? Do you own your child, or does the legislative branch, executive branch? See, this is the point of determining who and what branch of government you are of. And I mean you are of. Because the 14th Amendment, that's the one thing that when you sit there and you do this stuff and you write this stuff up and you put this stuff together and you bring these things into court, you have to separate your capital C and your lower C. That is the one thing that you have to comprehend, what the lower C is and the upper C is. Now, some have different opinions on that, and, that's fair, respectful. But it's like when you have an ID or your birth certificate, and they're using that for registration in these courts or jails, that's called legal identity theft. And that's the one thing that you have to file your identity theft paperwork, which I have done because I'm going after them through identity theft as well, because I'm going through after all the channels that I can for what they have done to me. And that's the one thing is to comprehend that you have to realize that either you were subject to a foreign agent court, and foreign agents is 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act. And I always prefer, you serve your elected and public employees, ask them if they're registered. Of course, when I serve my public employees, I do email the copy not only to them, but to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., to the Department of the Foreign Agent Registration Act themselves. That's why some of our public employees have been fired. The one thing is like we have this going on with the course going on with the former FBI agents, 3 of them. They didn't register as a foreign registered agent. So they were fired, and everybody's going, oh, they can't do that. Yes, Trump can do this. But he has the authority because Trump is the president of a fictitious corporation. And I believe it's U.S. 82301 that it says that the government is a foreign corporation. So it's knowing what government you are. Are you part of the government of the foreign corporation? Are you part of the government that is of the lawful bloodline American people? Because lawful bloodline and separation does exist. I produced court cases on that structure. I have written this and publicized it in the media. And I've never had anybody dispute me in elected and public house of Oregon. Never. Nobody in the House of Senate has gone against me. And I keep going after them and say, prove this, prove that, and nobody wants to prove anything. They just ask me to leave. They don't want me to be in that court proceedings. And a lot of time you'll find that they'll ask you to leave, dismiss your case or something like that, because when you start bringing these things, they don't want it publicly known. Because it's like the one thing, too, is that when you sit there and you start knowing how the dollar bill works, and that is the one thing that most people don't comprehend, how dollar bill works, because the dollar is the fictitious corporation of the federal government, called the Federal Treasury. And so once you realize the RNS numbers are not United States notes. They are not part of We the People. That is part of the Bankruptcy Act, what they did in 1933, March 9th. So it is bringing these points to the forefront of what the truth is. And people say, well, they never sat there and they never put in structures for elections. And all these men and women are running so many times. Well, of course they're running so many times. Of course they're getting away with it. And the reason why they're getting away with it is because they're going under the 14th Amendment. They're not going under the Constitution. And who has to file the constitutional structures that these men and women violate? We the people. 3 or more people make a witness, criminal charge. They say 2, but I like 3 or more. You get 3 or more, that has more standing than just a few. And that is the point, to bring these points out of who, what, why, and how. And also, too, Public Law 88243 and 88244. I do encourage people to read the public law, because when these men and women commit crimes, these are crimes against the people. They have laws there to protect we the people. And once you start realizing that those laws are there to protect you, and they're standing to protect you, it's like Federal Reserve notes and other notes, considering a part of common courtesy of a country, are recognized as good tender for money, unless specifically objected to. And that was McLean and Hoover case in 1925. You see, this goes back to 1925, and they got cases in 1934 that people were speaking against the de facto dollar. And so when they use your name in all caps, you don't want that. There's a gentleman that brings up a good point about, well, okay, you need to take your name and go get it certified by the court that you have the upper and lowercase names, so that way you basically own yourself. So you're out of the 14th Amendment structure. And that's a valid point. Very valid point. So these are things that we learn from one another, pass the information on, so this way we all comprehend it. Because once you realize that the people start comprehending what the truth is, things start making it easier. So a quote from September 17, 1787, from the Congress of, the Constitution for the United States of America. There's a difference when they change it from for to of. Knowing that term limits, therefore established by the Constitution for the President, Vice President, Senate, and House of Representatives. Legislative branch, section, House Representative shall be composed, so everybody know the basic membership fees and the structure of all that. But it gets into back in 1787 where they can only do a 2-year term. That's why they get elected every 2 or 4 years. But a maximum of 6 years. That's it. They cannot do a terminology of what they're doing today of these long 20 and 30-year spans. They can't do it. And that's the one thing people say, you're obligated to pay taxes. The 16th Amendment was never ratified. And this is even by a 1993 case, and that is Lloyd Long versus the IRS, or versus the IRS. So, and Dave Buse, when me and him were doing a show, we went over that because he was part of that case too himself. And it is comprehending how these things work compared to what we're led to believe. So once you comprehend the Constitution of who it's meant for, how it's to be applied, and who it works for. Because when you are a citizen and national, and I've had people try to argue with me, I'm a national, I got a national driver's license, I got a national ID, and I send them the laws, and I say, this is what's going on. They say, well, we don't believe in that. That doesn't have effect on us because national. Well, if you go back in British law, national is part of the British government, the foundation of the structure, and that was part of the agreement with citizens and national of the 1871 British contract we have with the Vatican after the Civil War. And that's the one thing I suggest to people. Read what the Civil War happened. People read that with the North and the South, the North won. They did win to a degree, but the war was technically called the draw. So that's why we ended up with the contract that came out with the 14th Amendment that gave the large C and the small c, citizen and national. So it is comprehending what the words mean. And once you start comprehending the words do mean have value, have substance, and so when you're going after your elected and public employees, you're filing criminal charges on them. Don't forget to put corpus delicti 3771. If you do not put that in, the courts look at that and say you're not the injured man or woman. They look at you as a corpus delicti or corpse. But always put in Title 18 U.S.C. Code 2381. That's capital felony of treason. When they go against their oath of office, but also, too, go to your county clerk. And I suggest this more than once. Go to your county clerk. Ask the clerk for a copy of their oath and have the clerk certify it. So you get to know if they have an oath to the Constitution of we the people or the Constitution to the corporation. It makes a big difference when you have that evidence in your hand certified. And people don't think that that has any implication, but it sure does, because when you have that certified, if you end up in court, now you have their words of evidence dictating to yourself and them of what they're supposed to go by. So that means, when you do that, you're not supposed to be there. And this is the point in Article 1 courts, Court 401, U.S. 222, 1971. People compelled to file income tax violates your Fifth Amendment rights. But that violates your Fifth Amendment rights if you are a large C citizen or a small C citizen. Because you're a small C citizen, when you go to court, this is how they get away for slamming you. And some of these court cases actually state the separation in these court cases of the difference. And people misread the court cases, or they don't catch it because it's that simple right in front of their face. It's that simple. It's right in front of their face. But see, if you don't have it in front of your face, how are you supposed to respond? What are you supposed to do and have the knowledge of? See, if you don't have the knowledge of how your courts work, lawful and legal, Article 1, Article 3 courts. And people say, well, the Article 3 courts don't exist. Yes, they do, but it depends on the way you write your paperwork and introduce it. I read this new one that apparently Liberty Alliance put out, National Liberty Alliance put out for the Bundys, and they're writing up a lower court case in it. And the one thing that is sort of interesting with that one, because the head of National Liberty Alliance, and I will find his name here in a minute because I know him, and he is a bar attorney. He has two different names he goes by. There are a lot of people that are on Facebook who are lawyers that use another name. They don't want you to know the truth of who they are, what they do. And I watch people all the time now show $1,500 to these people. Oh, they're going to get you out of your house bill. We're going to get you off your property taxes. And then they start getting them working, and then they bleed them for more and more money. And nothing ever gets done. So with that one, I ask you to suggest to you, ask your clerk for a certification of your property taxes. That's what I'm doing right now. I've got several letters that are going out right now this week going to my county on this. I've got a letter that is eventually going to go. We'll see if things get straightened out, or if I have to go through this point dealing with the county on these measures. So I will be filing in an Article 3 court if I have to. But preferably, I don't think the county wants to go through that, because I actually got videotapes and evidence where the county participated with the former sheriff and district attorney to murder me. It is not a joke. They do this. We know how they choose, people. We know people do this and murder people. So that is the point that gets us really disturbed when people do this stuff and go after and assault people and murder people for their own personal financial gain. And that is the one thing that people have to comprehend, that this thing actually does work that way, where they do go after people for personal and financial gain. And they don't want to let you know that that's how they do it. Because they do this. Because they don't care about you. When you are elected and public employee, you are educated to be the devil, primarily. We do have a lot of good elected and public employees that are honorable, that do tell you the truth, and without you being told the truth, that's how these people get away with it. But people are going to tell you the truth. Some of your public employees will tell you the truth. And when they do, respect them for it. Because if you don't respect them, how do you expect yourself to be respected? See, that's the one thing that people don't common sense comprehend these things. It's called respect. Honor. Where is the honor with people? Where is the appreciation with people? That's the one thing that people have got to start comprehending about honor and respect in the circumstances of life. Once you comprehend these things, life becomes so simpler to work. Life becomes so simpler to ease through life. But see, the one thing is that, I've never been in pretty much the system, my life. Social Security was the only thing I did in research, and I proved Social Security was what they call Constitution lawful. It was one that went through the Supreme Court in 1937 twice, and they proved it was for we the people, not for foreigners, not for immigration, not for anybody else. And that's the one thing that gets to me, because Carter was the first one who opened that up. And he was doing that when he went through court, and Article 1 court opened it up for the people. For foreigners, terrorists, different people. So it is knowing the situation of what, why, and how. And so that is the one thing that when you sit there and do that, without comprehending what they're doing to you, that is the one thing that you have to start putting the pieces together and knowing how you're standing on these things. Once you have the comprehension of not being afraid of your own shadow, most people are afraid of their own shadow. We know that. We were brought up that way. I was brought up originally, throw yourself on the mercy of the courts. What the hell are we being taught, throwing our mercy on the court? Because when you look at Article 1 courts, they're tribunal and they're run through the Vatican. So they're religious courts. They're not for you, the people. And that's the one thing that people don't even get that point. Because religion is racism. When people go, well, you're calling me racist because of the color of her skin, wake up. The Constitution states nothing about color of skin. The Constitution First Amendment says the right of free religion, but it doesn't say that if you're whatever color you are. So racism in Supreme Court decisions was based on religion. And that's the one point that, when you read this stuff and comprehend if you are an Article 1 citizen, corporation, or an Article 3 citizen of the capital C, that gives you rights. And I noticed a lot of changes when I started doing my education along the way, and I started comprehending things a little bit more, and I started doing standing up more for myself, and all of a sudden these people don't want nothing to do with me more and more. Like I said, I emailed today to the entire House and Senate. I wanted to make sure that finally got out. I did email some previously, but I wanted to make sure it got out because I didn't complete it. But today I completed for every House and Senate member to ask them completely the truth of what government agency owns the children. So, and then that way I can see what the responses come back to me. And then we'll get them posted up on new.org and trackers when they come back to me. So you can see the separation and differences of that structure. And it's like, dealing with foreclosures on property. When the sheriff's involved in a foreclosure, the local police department, that's terrorism. Literally, it's terrorism. Because they don't have authority to steal land. When you do a bank contract or a mortgage contract, I always tell people read it because you'll be surprised. You'll find in line where it gives you the rights. Oh, it's called insurance. And so you need to know your insurance rights. Because in all contracts, by the bank, by the county when you're doing a registration, and by the corporation that is doing it, your mortgage company or title company. Title companies all insure that with a title company. And with a title company, if you don't pay your mortgage or something like that, they do have insurance on the title company. You got 3 years to claim it. And if you don't claim it, the title company and the bank split it. That's just where it comes from. You know, and that's where I put out the structure with native-born and citizens. You know, there's a difference of native-born citizen, capital, and a small. And that's compared, and that is in Section 1 of the 14th Amendment. See, this is the point that you need to comprehend, that it's already in the structure. It's a word game. Remember, the attorneys and all this play the word game. Because that's how they make their money. They don't care about you. You're elected and public employees, most of them don't care. And like I said, if you do have public servants that actually honor their oath, that do care for the people, and that stand rightly alongside the Constitution of their oath, and that is the Constitution of we the people, not the 1871 Vatican Constitution of religion. And I've had people going, Ed, you keep attacking religion. And it's not, I'm not attacking religion in my thoughts. I'm just exposing the way it's brought out and the confusion of the lack of knowledge to the general public or to we the people. Because we get drugged into these things. We get taught that this is the way these things work when it doesn't work that way. You know, that's the one thing that people have got to realize. When you're going into these courts, it's like I put this thing out and on my deal and I put it in my paperwork. I'm not a United States 14th Amendment lowercase citizen. Resident, inhabitant. You see, originally I started putting inhabitant because I read 2 different laws on it. And then when I actually started doing deeper research, I realized that inhabitant means you're a 14th Amendment. Franchise, corporation, means you're a 14th Amendment. Commonwealth, there's another good one. I'm from a Commonwealth state. Well, if you're from a Commonwealth state, if people don't know the word Commonwealth, that means every man, woman, child is equal to their wealth, to their corporation. So Commonwealth means you don't own your wealth, you don't own your land, you don't own anything. The people do, of the government, of your elected and public servants. And when people talk about government, and I try to get people to separate the words, because you have elected and public servants, and we the people are the government. We have 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, and executive, legislative. Oh, I'll get the other one here in a minute. I have brain fart because I'm reading something else that I was trying to get into this one, because this gets into the county councils, your city councils, municipality bodies. All this stuff has a major role play on what's going on in your communities. That's why when I filed to get out of my city and county now, I'm putting together another affidavit that I will be posting up on our site, because I'll be sending that to the electricity company. I want them to prove it, because I know that when these stocks and bonds were originally bought to build the corporation, then they went after and said that the corporation had these rights, when the corporation doesn't have the rights. And people started going after them and said, oh, well, these men and women have these rights in an electricity company. Well, I always ask people, prove the rights to me in an electricity company. Because when you look at the smart meters that are put on your home today, those are controlled, and when you get the ring in the air, the ring, 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 that is high frequency structure that is in your ears that you get from the Wi-Fi's and that type of stuff. Brain fart, I gotta think about that. I can't remember what there's an actual word for it beside Wi-Fi. But it's when they're doing all these things with electricity, and you get the electricity waves. You actually can hear the waves. I had a guy out here with an electricity company one time trying to explain to me, well, when you get older, that happens. And I'm like, no, I never had that experience until after that meter was put on my home. Prior to that meter putting on my home, I never had an issue. So, and I know people who are filing on it. I know people who are winning in court on these things. And it is bringing it to the structure of the courts. And it's the proper court. Knowing where you are going in life is knowing what court you're in. Knowing what value you have of your rights or privileges. Because if you are a citizen, you definitely have privileges in the lower seat. And that's the point of knowing the courts and knowing when they come after you how to file. And you want to give them a chance, and then when they don't respond, then you file on them. You make sure you file on them. Because they don't care about you. Once you comprehend that your public servants, most of them, don't care. That's why these people get raped, robbed, and pillaged. It's like I always say to the cops, how do you like raping children? When children get picked up and go to CPS or whatever name they want to use, I don't care if they're 5 or 6 years old. Those kids are strip searched. That's called rape. When they kidnap you and take you to jail, that is technically a rape when they strip search you. So it's knowing what the circumstances of these of the words mean, of how they're filing against you and what court. And the main thing is always, always challenge jurisdiction. Ask them what court you're in. You know, that is the one thing. You've got to find out what court you are in. Because if you don't know what court you're in, where's your stance? Where's your standing? That is the one thing that people have to comprehend, these points of view of facts, not privileges. And if you're privileged personnel, well, privileges have a place too. But these are knowing where your privileges are compared to your rights. And once you know your rights, then that way you cannot be interfered with. But you have to know what a right is compared to a privilege. So when it comes down to it, you know, because it's like when you read these laws and you start coming up, you know, it's like the Dictionary of the Military and Associate Terms of the United States Department of Defense, and knowing what it means. And well, don't forget, the National Act did not take place until 1940. This was establishing maritime tribunal courts in our country. I mean, prior to that, nobody, I mean, even through the 1970s, most people never got arrested for drunk driving or doing stupid stuff. And most people, if they got arrested for drunk driving back in the 70s, they actually committed personal or property damage. If they didn't make amends within so many days, that's the authority that the foreign courts actually do have. But people don't realize the foreign courts do not have authority just to kidnap and hold you for a ransom because they assume. I mean, I ran through the courts and I got screwed by the court system because they wanted to prove me wrong because I wasn't that, I comprehended some stuff, but I didn't realize things. But I was convicted of a Dewey for .0002 and I was drinking Old Duels. So they railroad people, they do this, and that's the one thing is never hire a public pretender, an attorney. Because when you get an attorney, that takes away your constitutional rights, period. You give up your rights and turn it into a privilege in that court. You're giving yourself over to the court, and those attorneys know it. Very few attorneys will actually, or lawyers will fight, but I do encourage you to read Bovier's and Black Law Dictionary. Attorney and lawyers are called liars. Police department, the Supreme Court has said the cops can lie and do anything they want and are not liable to protect you. So when people call the police and they wonder why people get assaulted or shot, well, their job is not to protect you. Their job is to make money for the corporation. And that's their whole position, is to make money for themselves. Rape, rob, and pillage. It's the same thing that we've been dealing with thousands of years with the circumstances. And putting back the Constitution the capital C citizens in place is going to have to be done by the people. And as, like I said, when I bring these things up to you and ask you to read this stuff, please read this stuff. Look at the information that is provided. Because if you don't pay attention to this stuff, this is where we get in trouble. And comprehending a person that is, and listen to me with the word person, born outside the United States. And this is where people say, well, a person is not a citizen born outside the United States. But see, a person, if you actually read the law, a person is the same thing as a national and citizen, lowercase c and lowercase n. So it's the same thing. And if you capitalize the citizen and capitalize national, totally capitalize them, the words, that you're still under the 14th Amendment. If you do a capital C and the rest of it lower, you know. But I mean, even the court cases I've read with national, even when they go capital N and national, that still is under the British administrative rules, either or. And that's what the European Union was going through 3 years ago, when they wanted to separate themselves. And it's reading these things and paying attention to these circumstances that are out there that we're living. And like I said, I bring these points up to you. Like I said, this is a good read, 5 U.S.C. Code 55A. Well, I mean, I don't claim myself to be even really a citizen. I don't like to use that word, to tell you the truth. I'm just a bloodline native, and that's what I filed. My bloodline, I've proven all the way back to 1800s on this soil before the Civil War, but apparently my bloodline goes further back than that. But I'm waiting to have more proof, but I mean, I know what I've been able to physically prove in writing and by what I'm able to prove. And so, you know, we could hear our ancestors go back, you know, 1,000 years here. Okay, that's fine, but it's proving it. And see, once you prove, I mean, my family fought on the north and my family fought on the south. My family fought both sides of the war. So it's like one of those things of what, why, and how. You know, we weren't supposed to be in taxation. And everybody wants to say, oh, we need to pay taxes. They say, well, you need to pay taxes for schools. Well, on the East Coast, they started taxing schools in the 1900s. West Coast didn't really start doing that out here until later. But prior to that, nobody taxed schools because the people in the community helped pay for a teacher, and they brought the food to the school. The schools had gardens where the neighborhood, and I don't like neighborhood because that's another corporation structure, but the people in the area would go garden at the school, so that way they had food for the children. A lot of people had big gardens. You know, it wasn't until farming became so commercialized in 1840s when it really started becoming commercialized in this country. But that was mainly on the East Coast, not the West Coast. And then when they started cutting down the West Coast trees, to destroying our forest. And everybody says, well, the forest regrows, but the forest doesn't technically regrow. You lost all your medicine, your natural medicine, your native food. I'm in the West Coast. We have the issues with radiation from Hanford. We have the radiation from Fukushima in the ocean out here that the fish are changing. We're losing fish left and right. I mean, and that's the one thing, and you're eating a lot of seafood. What's the contamination level? When I grew up in the Bay Area of San Francisco, it said they had signs all over the bay. All over the bay. Said, don't eat more than 3 times fish or crab out of the bay itself because of mercury content. Because in the late 1800s, the gold rush people were sitting there flooding mercury and flooding the rivers and streams with mercury. And mercury don't go away. Nuclear waste takes 1,000 years for it to go away, if it goes away. And see, the scientist doesn't even know. And I was watching a deal the other day on Fukushima that was saying that if they have another earthquake that happens in that area because all three reactors are melted in the terminals, and the ocean is still washing and wiping it out, but if they have another earthquake and that goes in the ocean, the food is definitely dead around the world because the currents will take it around. It's knowing these things, how to prepare yourself so that way you're not in a disaster point of view. And that's why I'm saying the words. It's so important to know the words and the foundation of the words and how to use words. See, I mean, I when I was growing up, I never thought about that a lot. I mean, I knew that when I was growing up, I started my first business basically when I was 15, or 14, I mean. But I didn't have a business license or anything. I didn't consider it a basic business. I just did what I did. And then when I got older, I had a bodyguard company and stuff like that. But I never registered myself with the city or county or state. I went through a situation in California in 1981 where the state came after me, wanted me to register my hands as lethal weapons. And I told them to take a hike. And then they wanted me to give me, you need to register your arms. You need a concealed license permit. And I said, no, I don't. Prove it to me. And I went through that for a time, but you don't. It's knowing it because I have to be responsible and liable. I mean, when I was bodyguard or doorman or something like that or bouncer, I knew I had personal liabilities if I crossed the line that the business would not insure me for. I knew that, but that's part of the thing that I know young bouncers today, they don't get certain education. They are getting certain training that's telling them that if you do this or do that, you're liable or going to jail. And that's the one thing that some of it is getting taught today. Is like Fred Meyers is a good example with their hidden security in Fred Meyers. Technically, security in Fred Meyers can't even do a citizen's arrest. All they could do is be a witness to a theft. And I'm not encouraging anybody to steal because I don't endorse theft or stealing from somebody or even a corporation. Unless you're stealing from, not stealing, but unless you're maneuvering through the bank system correctly. And that is the one thing that you have to realize, that when it says these things about capital C, lower national, how the words means and how they apply. I mean, there's a lot of court cases I could read to you and bring this up to you, but I'm trying to get folks to open their eyes and do some education. Like I said, the one movie, if you watch Interstate 60, will open your eyes really to the court system. Once you get your eyes open and you start doing the research, people really get into the research on their own. When they, because I mean, knowledge, when you start reading and you get the knowledge, is better than fairy tale books to me. I couldn't do fairy tale books and all that stuff when I was in school. They would always try to get me to do it, but I wouldn't. Just couldn't do it. It wasn't plausible for me. I couldn't live in let my imagination go to a point where I couldn't be in reality. And so, and the other point is, look at United States 1345. In this thing, Section 8, Power of Congress, Naturalization and Bankruptcy, Legislative Department, 1345. It says, it says citizens ejected through naturalization is not a second-class citizenship. It says it right here. So that means you're not a lowercase citizen. So, I mean, these things are written in a point for you to comprehend these things. Because once you comprehend the words and how they are brought to our attention, that's the one thing, is that you have to read these things to comprehend the wording compared to what we think they are or what we're taught to believe. And always when an attorney tells me that I'm doing this to protect you, trust any attorney. Wouldn't trust them. I mean, I've fired attorneys. No problems in the past. No problems. And you don't want an attorney, because if you hire an attorney, you're a ward of the court. You give up your rights. You turn everything of your life and your assets to a privilege to own. That's called commonwealth. So that is the one thing, like I said, I'm going through this one instrument that we'll have up, and I thank the gentleman who sent this to me. But like I said, it clearly states in it, dealing with citizens, capital C, are not second-class citizens. Lower C and national or second-class citizens. And even when you read this instrument, it even says it in it. And so that's the one thing I will be posting up, and we'll get that out to people. And, you know, I thank the gentleman who sent this to me, because without that, you know, it's comprehending. You know, it's like, that's the other point. Children born out of wedlock, 8 U.S.C. 1409. So, and that's where they're trying to claim it as a corporation. And I know for a fact I've got children that have been born in this country since last year that don't have birth certificate, registrations, and they've been cleared by the state attorney general of those states not to be registered. Because the men and women were able to have common sense and talk to the state attorney general and explain the separation of difference, and that the state attorney generals know this. So they said, okay, well, we're not going to have no harassment, we're not going to deal with you. But when that happens, you have to set up your assets for your children. So that way, when they are free, they're going to be free. You make sure that they're not on the street homeless or something like that, because it's called personal responsibility. These are things that people don't comprehend. And I do recommend that you read the 3 branches of government. You know, executive, legislative, and administration. When you read this stuff and you start seeing the separation of these things, you know, and that's the other point. Here's another point. Legislative Department. Short brief 3121. Capital C citizen cannot conferred by special act of Congress. 1321 or 1322. So that's what I was bringing up earlier and what I brought up before. So, in other words, the lower C citizen is an act of Congress. The capital C citizen, has been mentioned 13 times through the Constitution, cannot be altered that way. But you have to know the structure of where you stand. That's why when people ask me, are you a resident? I don't claim to be a resident. I claim to be a man on the soil. I'm not claiming to be any of your corporation words that you try to bait me into it. You know, that's when police officers or public servants, when they pull you over, remember, an officer of the court, police officer, any elected and public servants or officers of the court. That's the truth. You know, and that's the one thing that when you comprehend these things and how these things go, it makes it so simple. Makes it so easy. You know? And that's the one thing is comprehending the Bankruptcy Act, 192, because I plan on getting more information out on that. We'll be doing a heavy talk show on that one here down the couple weeks. Because I want a couple more information set in my hands before I go that direction. But anyhow, I think at this point, I think we should open the floor, invite people in for their knowledge and their opinions, and preferably knowledge. And so let's open up the floor and see who would like to...
All participants are unmuted.
Hello?
Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Oh, yeah, this is Dave.
Oh, speak closer to the phone, Dave. How you been doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Well, I had a couple of comments I left on your chat. Didn't know if you saw them yet or not, but there's actually 4 branches of government.
Well, yeah, I know the people, but go ahead.
The first one is we the people.
Sure.
That's established in the Constitution. So we are the first branch of government.
Correct.
Then you have legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Now, these branches are dead entities. They exist in name only until we actually appoint, hire, elect people to actually run them. So the Constitution is their, what do they call that, administrative rules, Ed?
Yep.
And so they must obey those because what does it say? The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. So any government entity who would happen to write a piece of legislation in violation of the Constitution has committed an act of treason against it, and therefore subject to criminal prosecution if you can get somebody to actually do that. We have some major problems in our federal government. The corporation was never authorized by the Constitution, and it's nothing but a piece of crap. Because once the government becomes a corporation, it gives up its government entity. That's called the Clearfield Doctrine. So they have no authority over you as a corporation.
And you want to
lies your tax frauds.
Would you ever document?
We also have the proof that they care nothing about you when they steal your birth certificate bond and your certificate of live birth bonds. And they use them for their own personal gain. So there's your proof, Ed, on what you were talking about earlier, how they rape, rob, and pillages.
Mm-hmm.
So based on what I've just said, have you got any comments you'd like to add to that?
Well, yeah, I'd like you to repeat that document again.
It's called the Clearfield Doctrine.
Because I want to say that again.
Once the government becomes a corporation, it gives up its government entity and is nothing more than a mere corporation.
But no authority.
No authority over you. And what did they do in 1933?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they did it in 1925, state of Florida. The United States of America Company Corporation.
Filed
It was July 25th, 1925, if memory serves.
That is correct.
So, basically, we have a corporate president who goes around giving executive orders. Sorry, Mr. Trump, but that only applies to the corporation. It doesn't apply to we the people.
Hmm?
So you explain to me how the President of the United States can give executive orders and expect me to kiss his rear. There's nothing in the Constitution giving the President an executive order privilege to make legislation.
Hmm?
So why isn't the President held accountable by the United States House and Senate for fraudulent communications? Why isn't he doing his executive orders through the common practice of corporations through inter-office memos?
Very good point. So I'm glad to hear
most corporations operate. I've worked for the corporation. I've been in the office. I know how these things are handed down from the president of the corporation down through the various and the sundry offices and agencies of the corporation. It's done through an inter-office memo, not an executive order.
Well, and I want you to bring up a point here of Lloyd and Lloyd's case.
Lloyd R. Long?
Yep.
Well, it was proven in his case, United States versus Lloyd R. Long, Federal District Court, Alabama, if I remember right. The federal jury found Mr. Long not guilty of all charges when Larry B. Kraft, his attorney, proved to the jury that the 16th Amendment to the Constitution had never been lawfully ratified. There was actually only one or two states that actually ratified it. I obtained that information when I went to the hearing on taxation in Washington, D.C. in 2002. And by the way, Congress was given 300 questions prior to that hearing that was to be held, along with the IRS, to prove there was actually a law requiring you to pay an income tax, and that was done through a redress of grievance. Well, Congress, come the day of the hearing, bounced us around from one room to another, to another, to another, to another, and then, we got dropped like a hot potato. So we went over to one of the hotels there in D.C., and I don't remember what the name of it was now. But anyway, we held our own little hearing on it, and we invited the House and Senate to come on over and share the joy. Of course, nobody showed up, which tells you how yellow-bellied they are when they get cornered. And I have no respect for people who don't have respect for me. Actually, by failing to give us our redress of grievance, Congress committed an act of treason, both the House and the Senate. So let them think on that one a while. The problem was Laurie B. Kraft and Bob Schultz and Joe Bannister and the other people who were in charge of that never bothered to follow up and file criminal charges against them. Because they should have been taken out and shot right there and then. So, but that's what's happening in our country today. We have do-nothing Congress when it comes to we the people, and they think the corporation, through corporate policy, has the right to run it. They've taken our Constitution, put it in there as their bylaws, and they think they can change the Constitution by executive orders. And that's the con job we're putting up with today.
Yeah. Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I need you to send me a copy of that Clearfield document.
I did that earlier, Ed. But I can look it up again and send it to you.
Yeah, that was last year when we were doing the show together.
Yeah, when we were discussing the Constitution of the United States actually, ladies and gentlemen, establishes term limits. It also establishes the title of nobility without the 13th Amendment. It's actually in your Constitution. If you read the Constitution, you will find both term limits and the fact that anything with the title of nobility is not allowed to run for public office. And that's your esquires and your sirs and your madams and your all the other crap that they want you to put as a suffix before your name. So you need to, by the way, it's good to be on the show again.
Hear from you.
It's been a long haul for me. But anyway, you need to comprehend what all these little titles mean before your name. You're going back under British law, people. And the preamble of the Constitution says in the last paragraph, we are to have nothing to do with the British. Read it. So, anyway, I wanted to get a few things off my chest. The Supreme Court has ruled that men and women are sovereign. Governments are not. I'll repeat that. Men and women are sovereign. Governments are not.
Right.
Why is that? Because governments are established black ink on white paper. Men and women are bloodline. We are born with life's blood. The Bible says that children are a gift of God. Well, we all were born as children, weren't we?
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we are the sovereign, and they are public elected servants. So that I hope that clarifies things for everyone. And another thing you need to do, and I've said this before, you need to read the 17th American Jurisprudence, Section 177, in its entirety. Any law written in violation of this Constitution is never written, and no one is obligated to obey it. And I got a couple other things I want to get off my chest because I'm tired of the BS being passed around.
Go ahead.
Number one is that animals do not have rights. I don't care what they say. They are a bunch of incompetent asses who have made those decisions, and the reason for that is only citizens have rights. And I don't know of any dog, cat, horse, or anything else, being an animal, has ever taken a pledged allegiance to the country. So that should pretty much settle that one. And we have animal rights activists. I don't know where these incompetents came from, but I believe that there should be limits put on how you treat your animals, but that does not give them rights. Wake up.
Well, one thing, Dave, if they had rights, we couldn't eat.
Well, that's right, because, well, you got to remember, God gave man dominion over the animal.
Yep.
The animal responds to commands that he's trained for long periods of time to obey. So are we, the men and women, where did we get our training from? Our parents.
Mm-hmm.
But did they teach us to bark and beg?
Well, that depends.
Lunchtime?
Yeah, that depends on where you got it.
Yeah. See, this is the reason I'm saying, get your head out of wherever you got it and get it in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think you're directing that at me, but yeah, I know what you mean. Or Alex, but yeah.
Oh man, I'll tell you, I get so disappointed with our elected and public servants, the way they go on around about the crap they're trying to pull on us. It's just disgusting in my book, and it should be with a lot of Americans too.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a democracy. If you say your Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, let me do that for you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the what? Republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So anyone who's wanting to say this is a democracy, I believe you need to be charged with treason.
Mm-hmm.
So you think on that one for a while. Because I'm tired of the Democratic Party, and I use the word Democrat because for some reason they seem to think that this is a democracy along with ABC, CBS, NBC, and the rest of the coots.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, I got a few things off my chest tonight.
Well, I was glad to hear from you. We haven't heard from you in a while because I know you've been up and down on what's going on with you.
Yeah, well, I'm still recovering from the stroke. I am getting up and around. I appreciate all you people who did think of me while I was going through a rather major event. It's been a long, hard process. I had to go through therapy, several weeks of that. Still haven't got back the use of my left arm. I mean, it's still tingling and numb. The fingertips are completely numb. I can't feel anything when I have a hold of it on the left hand yet. So that's something that has to come back. I lost 20% vision in my left eye. Part of that has come back, and they're thinking the rest of it over time will come back. So, but they can't give me a deadline on it. So, but anyway, I'm starting to feel fat and sassy. So, and my attitude's improving. I think I have a good spirit and like to laugh and make jokes and stuff. So, anyway.
Well, I'm glad to see you getting back out, and I'm glad you called. We haven't heard from you in a long time, and you know that is the one point that we need to hear from you once in a while.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Ed, but I was watching my blood pressure, and believe me, when I get on this call, my blood pressure goes sky high. I think that's because I'm just finally just being able to get it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As they say, and so I have to really watch how long I'm on the show and what I do and what I say, because it does affect my blood pressure extremely. So my stroke, by the way, wasn't caused by a heart attack. It was the result of sugar diabetes and how that affected the heart. So, or the stroke. I mean, the stroke actually hit the upper right hand part of my brain. Pretty good portion of it.
Gotcha.
But it didn't affect my long or short-term memories, which I'm thankful for. So,
no, we're all glad for that one, because remember, we were on the phone a lot back and forth when that was going on.
Oh, I know.
You know.
Oh, and by the way, people who are going to go and file a case in the court, get a hold of your civil rules book.
Rules and procedure.
Yep, and follow that guideline. It gives you all the forms and everything you need to file your case in court. You're getting yourself kicked out of court for failure to state a claim because you're not following their procedures. You got to learn to talk like a crook. Oh, I'm sorry, the court. So, and that's what they're hoping you don't catch on to, is the fact that you're not following the civil procedures rule book when you file your case, because then they got a reason they can throw your case out of court.
Mm-hmm.
So it's over 100 pages long. So get ready to do some study. But depending on what your case is based on, you got to find the right paper to file.
Right.
So you don't use the entire civil rules booklet, you only use that which pertains to your case, but you've got to know the booklet and how those apply to your case.
Right.
So that's just a word to the wise, and I think you'll find that it's not the judge or whoever that you want to hold a grudge against, whether he's a Title 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever court. It's the fact how you file your paperwork into court is whether or not you're going to win. So do it the right way the first time and save yourself a lot of grief.
Yep.
I rest my case, Ed.
We're on the same side. Well, let's open it up for somebody else for a minute, and then we'll come back to you, Dave. Don't take off yet.
Okay.
Ed, I think you should give Dave a copy of the court's mission statement on that shows that they don't want republic anywhere in the mission statement. It's all democracy.
Yeah, but you know what I would like to do is I got a friend of mine that has a book he wrote years ago. I'd like to get him actually a copy of that book because that would be very knowledgeable for him.
Well, the courts, you have to remember, the court, 90% of the courts in America are members of N of Court. So if you go to page, I think it's 805 of Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition, and look up N of Court, you will find that the judge is actually a bailister, a tax collector for the crown.
Yep.
Now that would be a conflict of interest.
Yep.
So the judge is sitting there on his high and mighty, being a tax collector for the crown, knowing perfectly well that that's what he's doing. My oh my. I think we have some major problems with the court system in the United States.
Right.
And you know, people, it is our right to alter and abolish any form of law that becomes destructive to these ends. So we need to write some proclamations and tell Congress, hey, from now on, this is how the court system's going to be ran.
Yeah, and that's the point, though. But we have to do more than one man or woman doing this stuff, because me and Dave have actually filed in the courts on these things. And like I said, I love bringing up what we did with Judge Scalia. That was one hell of a deal that we did with that for the lawful and legal in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I try to explain to people on that, because there is a difference. It has been explained. It has been brought into court to know the separation of lawful and legal. And without that, we wouldn't have our rights. You know, that's the one thing that we wouldn't have these rights. And compared to privileges. Because, see, I mean, having arms is not a privilege, but having a gun, a weapon, rifle, pistol, those are privileges, but arms are not. It is the wording. Oh, so does anybody else would like to bring something to the table at this point? Okay, I guess nobody else would like to bring something. So, but anyhow, Dave, so what else you been up to? You know, I did send some information your way. I take it you received the other one I sent you? You still there, Dave?
No, he actually left. I think he's making sure that his blood pressure stays lowered.
Okay, yeah, that's probably a good sense of what he's gone through. Because, you know, we went through some things several months ago, and, you know, it is one of those things when you try to do stuff for people and you try to you know, when they're stupid, it's pretty hard to deal with stupid. Stupid will always prevail. So, but anyhow, seeing that he took off, I was glad to hear from Dave. That was the one thing we haven't heard from him in a while. Because me and Dave did this disclaimer talk show for, 2.5 years. Till his stroke, and then once he had his stroke a few months back, he's still been dealing with that one. And so, and he does bring up a good point too. With the Constitution, we're not supposed to have anything to do with the British government, the British at all. So, and that's Article 1 legislative courts. So these are the points of bringing this in, of knowing what, why, and how. And once we comprehend what, why, and how, that's how we're going to make the difference for the children and for the other lawful Americans versus legal citizens. So that is the very valuable part, that when we do these things or we put these affidavits together, and and when you do an affidavit, don't forget to put your other cases into that memorandum next to it. You write your facts, then you have your memorandum on the side, the other page that puts everything together, so when they meet to one, now it becomes one instrument. So these are things to look at and to think about. Because when you put your instruments together, you have to be able to prove that you're the injured man or woman. You have to prove the evidence in which you are stating. Because, see, if you don't prove your evidence, you have no case. And that is the one thing that we do have to be able to prove, the evidence of the case. Because you don't want somebody doing hearsay on you. And like so many people with the Article 1 courts end up going to jail for somebody doing hearsay, saying that, they did something wrong, and when they really didn't do something wrong. I mean, that's like the one guy that just got released 2 months ago. I think it was 2 months ago. He spent 21 years in federal prison accused of inappropriately touching a young girl. When the truth finally came out after 21 years, he never touched anyone, and not only that, he wasn't even in the area. But like I said, these district attorneys and pretenders, lawyers, and attorneys, remember juries, and see, this is the one thing that, I'm going to be working on a bill eventually, because I don't think that any juror should be allowed on any jury that is elected in public servant or a contractor to the Elected and Public Employees Union. You have to be a capital C citizen to be on a jury. And that's the way that used to work. They used to work that way. And it wasn't until recent years they allowed anybody to be on a jury, basically, and they went from 12-man juries to 6-man juries in the court system 30 years ago. In 1999, they changed the jury's handbooks in Lincoln County, my county, and when they put the new one in, it was basically you do what the judge tells you, and the judge is going to tell you the law. That's what it says today. Prior to that, the original book said, the jury is over the judge and has authority and can decide what the law is. But people are not taught that or educated that in any form today. And that's the saddest part. We do live in this hypocrisy that we are, living right now. But we people can change this in time. It does take a little time for these things to change. And so when we start changing it, that's the whole point. Especially like with DHS cases and trying to get people to comprehend. Everybody wants to go fight that I didn't do this and I didn't do that. The state stole my kid. And it's like, did you ever claim that you owned the kid? Did you ever put a claim on the child? Because if you didn't put a claim on your child, the state is claiming the child is theirs, not yours. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're making a claim stating that child is theirs. And that's what it's trying to get the people to comprehend what a claim is, or ownership. Because I did put out a piece where people can own their child, and you file to own your child before it's born, and then once it's born, you've got the ownership. And that way, when your child's 18, then it's up to you to have the responsibility to educate that child and turn the ownership back to the child when it becomes an adult. So that way the adult now comprehends that. I mean, when it really comes down to it, life is so simple, but the corporations of elected and public employees of the foreign governments have made it so difficult. And we're not even supposed to technically do business with foreign governments. We've got enough resources on our own land here, soil, on our own soil in the 48 states. We don't need to go outside for outside resources. And if we actually recycle our products, really recycle, we wouldn't have to dig the earth and do all this stuff, because aluminum and plastic could be recycled hundreds of times over. So it's looking at how to comprehend to protect our country compared to giving it away to foreign establishments. And one thing, too, is standing up under democracy. Foreign governments and foreign people can own land. In a republic of the Constitution, foreigners, and it even says it, foreigners can't own land in our 48 states. Remember, Alaska and Hawaii are part of the corporations after 1950, was it 57, 59? They were brought in as corporation states. They are not part of we the people. So it is comprehending the separation of lawful and legal and the circumstances of thereof. And the other point that I always put in my instruments when I'm quoting their law is whereas. Whereas, that's what attorneys do, whereas. So I'm using their information back to them, so I'm using whereas, that's their information, so that's the way that their corporation writes it to them, whereas. So these are thoughts of how to do this, that, and the other thing. Once you comprehend how to do this, that, and the other thing, it really does work. It really does make a stance. So that is the most important thing, comprehending your elected and public servants, comprehending the circumstances of how your elected and public employees are authorized. Because, see, you have to make sure that they are authorized by you. Nobody else can make sure that happens. So once you start putting your instruments together and doing this, because preferably you don't want to go to a court. You don't want to go to their damn jury, what they call their jury trials. So you want to have a jury of, a trial of the jury, not jury trial. Hopefully I said that right. But
you want to have a trial by jury, not a trial with jury.
Thank you for the clarification.
Trial with jury has a judge. A trial by jury does not.
Right. That's what I was waiting to hear somebody clarify.
And you're not going to get that trial by jury. They're not going to let it happen in the military court. A trial by jury in the military court, the jury's called a panel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's a jury of your military peers. That's when you do certain things and get yourself out of the military. These courts don't want you even near them anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're all fighting that one. And that's why when we start correcting these things and getting this stuff starting to be clarified, then that way we don't have the arguments, the issues, and the situations that we are living by today that has been shoved down our throats. And we could change these things. Yeah, we can really change these things. But it does take time for it to happen. So, I mean, that is the one thing that, it's up to us, to do this. And to do it for the children. That is the one thing that if we don't protect the children, nobody else is going to do it, because your elected and public employees look at them as dollar signs. That's all they do, is they look at them as dollar signs. They don't care about them. So, anybody else got something they would like to throw in tonight? Well, I guess then, seeing that that's where it's at tonight, I got quite a few things I'll be bringing in tomorrow night on on the issue. So I guess that if nobody's got anything else to say, I'll bring. I guess I'll give it one more shot. Anybody else like to speak up? Okay. Well, with that, we'll conclude tonight. And may the Great Spirit look over you, bless you. May Mother Earth provide the food and our future, and may the Creator look out over all of us.
Ed?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you send that court case on the IRS, please?
On the IRS, what?
The court case you put on the IRS.
Which one?
The one where the 16th Amendment was ratified.
It was never ratified.
Yeah, I know. Could you send me that court case?
Oh, yeah, I'll send you the court case. I misunderstood what you said. Absolutely, I'll get that to you. Yeah,
I'll make you a favor. I'll send you the Fairfield Trust Doctrine court case if you send me that.
Oh, no problem. We can swap. Yeah, because that's the one thing that, that's the whole point about passing information back and forth with each other. So we're protecting each other, we're protecting the bloodline. And so, yeah, I'll get that to you, and I'll even send you the long case, too, and all that, too. So we can get that sent to you, so that way you have all that. And also, too, did I ever say, I think I did send you the 5th Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court said if you file your taxes to violate the 5th Amendment, right? Now that case came out of the Supreme Court last year. So, I never filed. I don't play their games, and so when they come after me, and it's right now, I'm dealing with circumstances, so I'm getting that one to be put out. So once I get that one put out, then I'll get that put up on the website. I got more that I'm putting out on the website on some other cases that I'm, throwing some ideas at, but I want to make sure that, it's just the ideas, because I'm not going to be putting people's stuff up there. Because some people like to have their rears protected, and, and I don't blame them on that one, because I've truly been there myself. So the other point is, be aware of AXJ.
No way.
You know what I'm talking about. That guy, they're called criminals, and they are, several of those guys who work for AXJ are actual FBI agents.
Yeah, I used to work with them people. I know all about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Action for justice.
I was smart enough not to get involved with Ed Vallejo.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not to interrupt, but I'm on your live on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of echo, like someone's on a speakerphone.
Oh, okay. Well, I know I'm on a speakerphone.
Well, it just happened when this other guy started talking. That's what I have to say right now.
Gotcha. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So, but yeah, no, I want to bring that up, and they have a link to AXJ Patriots, and they go through the structure of what they try to do. They actually put up a page for the Finnegans, and people were donating it, and those people were pocketing the money.
Yep.
So Ed Vallejo is a foreigner. He's been charged and convicted for several crimes, but all these people work for him. And I've dealt with some of these people, and they try to come after me, and it didn't work. They tried to get me to join their stuff, and I did research on that. So there's a Patriots Against AXJ on Facebook, and they have a lot of information on that group, AXJ, and what they do, and the people how they use people. And so every time I know people that are still involved with them, like I said, you just don't want to deal with them. So, and like I said, you personally know that one yourself, so it is one of those things not to get wrapped up in these people that are, basically spies that are getting information to turn you in. And that's the one thing that the Bundys had in their court cases with a lot of people. Well, not a lot. They had a few people that turned a deal on them, and that backfired in their face. So that's the thing. You want to pay attention. You want to pay attention to the truth.
I hear you.
You know. So, but anyhow, so I appreciate the other comment from the young lady on that one, and also too. So I guess we have nothing else to comment to. I guess we'll just call it an evening tonight.
Okie dokie.
So I will say again, may the Great Spirit look over you. May Mother Earth provide for you, and may the Creator really protect us all.
Thank you for listening to the disclaimers by Ed Johnston, and in his own words, he has said he puts out